I have a theory about the moments that change your life. They never announce themselves. They do not arrive with music or ceremony or the dramatic weight that retrospect will later assign to them. They arrive looking exactly like ordinary Tuesday afternoons, like a knock on a door you almost did not answer, like a stranger standing in a hallway with two bags and rain in his hair, and the specific exhausted expression of someone who has run out of options and is trying very hard not to show it. That was how Mateo Rivera walked into my life. And nothing from that Tuesday forward was ever the same. My name is Callum Reed, and before Mateo, I had my life arranged exactly the way I liked it. I want to be honest about this because the story only makes sense if you understand who I was before it began. I was not unhappy. I was not lonely in the dramatic sense, not the kind of lonely that announces itself in obvious ways. I was the quieter kind of lonely, the kind that settles in so gradually you stop recognizing it as loneliness and start calling it preference. I liked my routines. I liked my apartment, a two-bedroom place in Austin, Texas that I had occupied alone for 2 years since my previous roommate moved to Seattle for a job. I liked my work, graphic design, freelance, done from the desk by the window with good coffee and a playlist I had been refining for 3 years. I liked my evenings, which were mine entirely, structured around cooking actual meals and reading actual books and occasionally calling my sister in Edinburgh, who was the person I talked to most honestly about most things. I was 28 years old and I had organized my life into something clean and manageable, and if I was being truthful with myself in the way that only very late nights allowed, a little bit empty. I had posted the room for rent not because I needed the money, though the extra contribution was not unwelcome, but because my sister had pointed out during one of our calls that I had not mentioned a single other human being in 6 weeks of conversation, and that this was, in her words, a concerning data point. You need another person in your physical space, Cal, she had said, not on a screen in a room, a real one. I had argued, she had been persistent, I had posted the listing. That was the chain of events that led to the knock on the door on a Tuesday evening in October. I had shown the room to 4 people before Mateo. The first was a student who wanted to practice drums at home and seemed genuinely puzzled by my hesitation. The second was pleasant but mentioned 3 times that she worked night shifts and hoped that wouldn't be an issue, which it wouldn't have been except that the way she said it 3 times made me feel like there was information I was not receiving. The third canceled twice and then simply stopped responding. The fourth arrived 40 minutes late, looked around the apartment without much interest, asked if the Wi-Fi was fast, and left before I had fully finished explaining the lease terms. I was beginning to think my sister had given bad advice. And then it was Tuesday evening and raining, the specific warm October rain that Austin does, and I opened the door and there was Mateo. He was 26, though I didn't know that yet. Brown skin, dark hair pushed back from his face and damp from the rain, dark eyes that were alert and intelligent, and currently doing the careful work of presenting more composure than he actually had. He was wearing a jacket that was not quite warm enough for the weather and carrying one large duffel bag and one smaller one, and there was something in the set of his jaw that I recognized immediately as the particular determination of someone who is not going to let you see how close to the edge they are. Callum Reed, he said, I'm Mateo Rivera. I sent a message about the room. His voice was steady, his hands, I noticed, were not entirely. Come in, I said, you're soaked. I'm fine, he said, with the automatic reflex of someone who has learned to say they are fine before anyone has time to ask. You're welcome to be fine inside, I said and stepped back from the door. He came in, set his bags down with the careful deliberateness of someone managing his own presence in a space that is not yet his, and looked around the apartment with the focused attention of someone conducting an assessment. He looked at the bookshelves, the desk by the window, the kitchen that was visible from the entrance. He looked at it all with a thoroughness that was not critical but careful, the way a person looks at a place when they are trying to determine if it could be safe. It's nice, he said quietly, like he meant it specifically. Thank you, I gestured toward the kitchen. Do you want tea, coffee? You're wet and it's cold. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't fully read. Tea would be good, he said, thank you. We sat at the kitchen table and I told him about the apartment and he told me about himself, the curated version that people present in these situations, the professional facts and the practical arrangements. He was a photographer, freelance work supplemented by shifts at a design studio downtown. He had been in Austin for 18 months. He was looking for somewhere quieter than his current situation. He did not say what his current situation was. I did not ask. People reveal things at the pace that feels safe to them, and I had learned somewhere along the way to respect that pace. What he did not say, and what I would learn gradually over the weeks that followed, was this. He had been living with his ex-partner for 3 months after their relationship ended because neither of them had anywhere else to go and the lease wasn't up, and it had been by any measure a quietly devastating situation. He had finally found a sublet for his portion of the lease, packed his 2 bags and left. The 2 bags were not a minimalist lifestyle choice. They were everything he had been able to carry without going back. He also did not say that he was gay. He didn't need to. It was not a secret or a revelation. It simply was not information that the room listing required, and he was someone who did not volunteer personal information in a first conversation with a stranger. I respected that too because I was the same way, and because I was gay myself and had long since stopped treating it as something that needed announcing in every new context. What I noticed, sitting across the kitchen table from him that first evening, was this: he was careful, he was intelligent. He had a quality of stillness that existed alongside a visible interior life, something moving behind his eyes that his composed exterior was working to contain. He asked good questions. He listened to the answers actually. And when he smiled, briefly, at something I said about the neighbors in the apartment above who apparently practiced what sounded like competitive furniture rearranging between the hours of 10 and midnight, it arrived suddenly and transformed his face completely, like a light coming on in a room you'd assumed was empty. I showed him the room. He stood in the doorway and looked at it, the afternoon light and the window and the clean, simple space of it, and something in his shoulders dropped slightly, almost imperceptibly, the specific physical release of someone who has been holding tension so long they have forgotten what it feels like to put it down. "I'll take it," he said, "if that's all right." "It's all right," I said. He moved in the following Saturday. Here is what I learned about Mateo Rivera in the first 2 weeks of living with him. He woke up early, not loudly, not disruptively, but consistently, and the smell of coffee would be present in the apartment by 7 every morning. And if I came into the kitchen, he would already be at the table with his camera or his laptop, always working, always focused, with the energy of someone who uses productivity as a way of not sitting still with himself. He cooked, properly, carefully, the way people cook when food is a language they are fluent in. On his third evening, he made a lamb stew that made the entire apartment smell extraordinary, and he made enough for 2 without asking and left a bowl covered on the counter with a post-it note that said, "In case you haven't eaten." No obligation, I had not eaten. The stew was remarkable. I told him so, and he looked pleased in the specific way of someone who is not used to being told that the things they do well are good. He was quiet in the way that comfortable introverts are quiet, not cold, not withholding, but economical with words, spending them where they counted rather than filling silences for the sake of it. I found this immediately comfortable because I was the same way, and because there is a specific relief in not having to perform sociability in your own home. He took photographs of ordinary things. I noticed this because on his first Saturday he spent an hour on the small balcony taking photographs of the light moving across the building across the street. And the results, which I saw later on his camera screen when he showed me something else and I glimpsed them briefly, were genuinely extraordinary. He had a way of finding the specific quality of a moment, the angle of light, the depth of shadow, the particular texture of something ordinary looked at closely, that made you see the thing differently afterward. He was, I was beginning to understand, quietly remarkable. And he was also, very clearly, not okay. It was not dramatic, it was not a breakdown or a crisis. It was smaller than that and in some ways harder to watch because of its smallness. He was fine during the day. Working, present, functional, occasionally even warm in the specific way that warmed up slowly but genuinely once it arrived. But there were moments. The way he would go very quiet sometimes in the evenings, sitting on the couch with a book open but not reading, somewhere far away inside himself. The way he checked his phone occasionally with the specific resigned expression of someone who both hopes and does not hope for a message. The way he sometimes laughed at something on the television and then immediately looked like he had surprised himself, like joy was a thing that caught him off guard. I recognized it, not from personal experience with his specific situation, but from the broader experience of knowing what it looks like when someone is rebuilding themselves quietly in the aftermath of something that took more out of them than they had expected. I did not push, I did not perform concern or insert myself into his process. What I did was small and practical and completely genuine. I made sure there was good food in the kitchen. I kept the apartment warm when the October evenings cooled. I put music on in the evenings that was neither demanding nor absent, the kind of ambient presence that makes a space feel inhabited without requiring anything. When he was quiet, I was quiet. When he wanted to talk, I was available. My sister called during the third week and asked how the new roommate situation was going. It's good, I said. He's good. That's the most animated I've heard you sound about another person in months, she said, with the precision of someone who has known you your whole life. He makes good stew, I said. Callum. He's a good roommate, I said, that's all. She made a sound that communicated with characteristic efficiency that she did not believe that was all and was choosing not to press it yet. I told myself she was wrong. I was being a good person, a decent roommate. I would have done this for anyone. This was, I would later understand, not entirely true. It was a Wednesday, 4 weeks after he moved in. I know it was Wednesday because I had a deadline the following morning and I had stayed up working later than I intended, and it was past 2 in the morning when I finally closed my laptop and went to the kitchen for water. The light in the kitchen was on. Mateo was sitting at the kitchen table, not working, not reading, just sitting with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had clearly gone cold, staring at the table surface with the expression of someone who has been sitting alone with something for too long and is exhausted by it. He looked up when I came in. There was a brief and completely unguarded moment before his composure reassembled itself, and in that moment I saw exactly how much he had been carrying and how tired he was of carrying it. Sorry, he said immediately. I didn't think anyone was still up. Don't apologize, I said. I went to the kettle and refilled it without asking. Your tea's cold. He looked down at the mug. I didn't notice. I made fresh tea, set it in front of him, sat down across the table, not crowding him, not performing attentiveness, just being present, available, not requiring anything. He looked at the fresh tea for a moment. Then he said, quietly and without looking up, his name was Daniel. We were together for 2 years. I thought, he stopped, started again. I thought we were building something. It turned out we had very different ideas about what we were building, and neither of us said so for long enough that it became a different kind of problem. I did not say anything, just waited. I don't miss him the way I thought I would, he said. I think I miss the idea of what I thought it was, which is its own kind of strange to grieve. He finally looked up. His eyes were dry, but the tiredness in them was very old. I just keep waking up at 2 in the morning and sitting here because it's better than lying in the dark thinking. I know that particular 2 in the morning, I said honestly. He looked at me. You do. Everyone who has ever cared about something they lost has a version of that 2 in the morning, I said. It doesn't mean you're broken, it means you loved something real. That's not nothing. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said, I suppose it isn't. We sat at the kitchen table for another hour, not always talking, sometimes just existing in the same space in the particular solidarity of 2 people who are both, in their different ways, familiar with quiet grief and the relief of not being alone in it at 2 in the morning. When he finally said goodnight and went to his room, he paused in the doorway and looked back. Thank you, he said, not for the tea specifically, for the whole hour. Anytime, I said, and I meant it completely. I sat alone in the kitchen for a while after he left, looking at the 2 empty mugs on the table, and tried very carefully not to examine too closely why that hour had felt like the most genuinely connected I had been with another person in longer than I could clearly remember. I was not entirely successful. There is a specific geography to falling for someone you live with. It is different from falling for someone you see occasionally, someone you can retreat from between the moments that make you feel too much. When you share a space with a person, there is no retreat. The moments accumulate without permission. The ordinary becomes intimate. And before you have made any conscious decision at all, the shape of your daily life has reorganized itself around someone else's presence, and removing them from it would leave a hole the exact size and shape of them. I know this now. I was learning it then, slowly, and with the specific reluctance of someone who had spent 2 years making their life uncomplicated on purpose. November came, and with it the particular quality of light that the Texas autumn does unexpectedly well, low and golden and long, arriving through the apartment windows in the late afternoon with a warmth that made everything look like it was worth keeping. Mateo was better. Not completely, not all at once, but the gradual visible better of someone whose feet are finding ground again. The 2 in the morning kitchen sessions became less frequent. He laughed more readily. He started leaving his camera on the kitchen counter during the day, the way you leave something in a space when you have stopped being uncertain about your right to be there. He also started talking to me, not just the practical logistical exchange of two people sharing a space, but actually talking, the kind of conversation that goes somewhere unplanned and takes longer than either of you expected and leaves you slightly more known than you were before. We talked about photography and design, his eye and my eye, and the specific pleasure of being two people who think visually, comparing notes about what they see. We talked about our families, his mother in San Antonio who called every Sunday with the specific warm stubbornness of a woman who loves fiercely and expresses it by feeding people and asking direct questions, his younger brother Marco who was studying engineering in Houston, and apparently had approximately no idea that his older brother was gay, because Mateo had not yet found the version of that conversation that felt right. We talked about Austin, what we liked and what we found ridiculous about it, and discovered an overlapping geography of favorite places that felt like the beginning of a shared language. He was funny. This surprised me in the specific way that funny people who don't perform their humor always surprise you, the wit arriving dry and perfectly timed and making you laugh before you knew it was coming. He was also, I was increasingly unable to ignore, beautiful. Not in an abstract or general way. In the specific detailed way that comes from paying close attention to a person over weeks, learning the particular quality of their expressions, the way they move in a space, the things their face does when they are thinking or amused or moved by something. I knew the way he looked in the early morning at the kitchen table, unguarded and still half in sleep. I knew the way he looked when a photograph he was editing came together the way he had hoped, a quiet, fierce satisfaction. I knew the way he looked at 2 in the morning across a kitchen table when he finally let himself stop performing fine. I was, in short, in a considerable amount of trouble. In the second week of November, he asked if he could photograph me. We were on the balcony on a Sunday afternoon, both working in the comfortable parallel way we had developed, when he looked up from his camera and said, simply and without preamble, "Can I take your photograph? The light is doing something specific to that wall behind you and you're in the frame naturally. You don't have to do anything different." I looked at him. "I'm not very photogenic," I said, which was both a deflection and true. "Photogenic is a myth," he said. "It just means someone knew how to look at you." He held the camera loosely in his hands, not raising it, waiting. "You can say no, I just thought I'd ask." I said yes, not because I particularly wanted to be photographed, but because the way he asked, simply and without pressure, with the genuine quality of someone who sees something worth capturing and wants to, made saying no feel like denying something real. He took perhaps 8 photographs over the next 20 minutes. I kept working. He occasionally said small directional things, not poses, just suggestions about light and angle, and his voice while he worked was different from his conversational voice, quieter and more focused. The voice of someone whose entire attention has narrowed to a single point. He showed me the results later that evening. I'm not someone who is comfortable with photographs of himself. I find them generally alienating, the version of me in a photograph always slightly foreign, not wrong exactly but not quite right either. These were different. I do not know how to explain it except to say that he had photographed me the way he photographed the light on the building across the street, finding something in the ordinary that I had not known was there. I looked in his photographs like a person worth looking at. "These are good," I said inadequately. "You're easy to photograph," he said. "You don't try to look like anything, you just are what you are." I looked at him across the kitchen table. "That might be the nicest thing anyone has said to me in a while," I said. He smiled, the slow, full version. "Then people haven't been paying sufficient attention." Something in my chest did something specific and unhelpful that I spent the rest of the evening trying to reclassify as friendship and largely failing. Here is where I need to be honest with you about a mistake I made, not a dramatic mistake, not a cruel one, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from caring about someone and letting that caring make you overreach without realizing that you are doing it. In the third week of November, Mateo mentioned almost in passing that his camera needed a specific repair, a shutter mechanism issue that had been developing for months and that he had been postponing because the cost was more than he could comfortably manage at the moment. It was not a request. He was not asking me for anything. He mentioned it the way you mention a background frustration to someone you are comfortable with, not expecting action, just sharing. I fixed it, or rather, I found the repair shop, researched the cost, and when he left for a full day shoot the following Saturday, I took the camera in and paid for the repair myself. I left it back on his desk with a note that said, "Got this sorted, don't worry about it." I thought I was being helpful. I thought it was a kind thing to do for someone who had become important to me. I thought, if I was being fully honest with myself, that I wanted to do something for him that he did not have to ask for, because he was someone who found asking for help genuinely difficult, and I wanted him to have the help anyway. What I had not considered was how it would feel to him to receive it. He came home that evening, found the camera, read the note, and went very quiet. I was in the kitchen when he came to find me. He was holding the note, and his expression was something I could not immediately read, not angry but not simply grateful either. "You paid for my camera repair," he said. "The shutter thing was going to get worse," I said. "I was in the area and it wasn't." "Callum," he said my name in a way that stopped me. "How much did it cost?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." His voice was even but firm. "How much?" I told him. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. "I'm going to pay you back," he said. "I need you to understand that's not a maybe." "You don't have to." "I do have to." He set the note down on the counter, and then in a quieter voice, "I know you meant it kindly, I know that, but I need you to understand something about me." He looked at me steadily. "I spent 2 years in a relationship where the way someone showed care was to solve my problems without asking if I wanted them solved. It felt like love for a long time before I understood it was control. And I am not saying you are doing that, I know you are not. But when someone does something for me that I didn't ask for and can't easily repay, it puts me in a position I don't like being in." The silence in the kitchen was very specific. "I understand," I said, and I did, immediately and completely. "I'm sorry, you're right, I overstepped." He looked at me for a moment. The firmness in his expression softened slightly. "I'm not angry," he said. "I just needed you to know." "I'm glad you told me," I said. "I mean that." He nodded, started to leave the kitchen, then stopped. "It was kind," he said quietly with his back still half turned. "The intention was kind, I just need kindness to ask first." "Noted," I said. "I'll ask first." He went to his room. I stood in the kitchen with the specific discomfort of someone who has made a mistake that came from a real place and is sitting with the consequence of it. And also with something else, the fact that he had trusted me enough to tell me the truth about why it landed the way it did, which was, if I thought about it, its own kind of intimacy. We were careful with each other the next day, not cold but careful. And then the day after that he knocked on my studio door and asked, formally and with a slight smile, "Is it all right if I make enough dinner for 2 tonight? I want to try a new recipe and I think it needs a second opinion, if you're interested." "I'm interested," I said. The careful dissolved over dinner. By the end of the evening we were back to ourselves, perhaps more honestly than before, the small rupture and repair of it having established something new between us. A line we both now knew was there, and somehow knowing where the line was made the space inside it feel safer. December arrived and the apartment became warmer in every sense. He put up lights, not the performative Christmas kind but small warm string lights along the bookshelf and the kitchen window, the kind that make a space feel like someone has decided it deserves to be beautiful. I came home one evening to find them already up and the apartment transformed, softly glowing, and Mateo on the couch with a book looking up with the expression of someone slightly uncertain whether they have overstepped. "I should have asked," he said immediately. "No," I said, looking around at the light. "This is exactly right." He relaxed. "I do this every December. My mother does it too, the whole house. She says dark evenings need something warm to look at." "Your mother is correct," I said. He smiled. I sat on the other end of the couch. We read in the warm light of the string lights for an hour and I thought, quietly and without drama, that I could not remember the last time I had been this simply and completely content in my own home. It was also in December that I finally acknowledged, in the privacy of my own interior, what had been building since October. I did not call my sister and confess. I did not write it in a journal or make any kind of declaration to myself. I simply sat with it, the understanding that I had fallen for my roommate, carefully and completely, in the way that happens when you spend 2 months paying close attention to someone who is worth paying attention to. I sat with it and I was honest about it, and I decided, with the same careful deliberateness I applied to most things, that I was not going to act on it. He was healing. He was not 6 months out of a relationship that had cost him something significant. He was not in a place to navigate new feelings, and I was not going to put him in a position of having to manage mine. He lived in my apartment. The stakes of getting this wrong were not abstract. I was going to be his friend, a good one, a real one, and if the feeling was mine to carry quietly, then I would carry it quietly because some things are more important than saying the true thing at the wrong time. I had made this decision. I had not anticipated what he was about to do. There is a particular kind of courage that belongs specifically to people who have been hurt before and choose, with full knowledge of what hurt feels like, to reach toward something anyway. It is not the courage of someone who doesn't know the risk. It is the courage of someone who knows it completely and decides that the thing being reached for is worth the risk of not being met. Mateo Rivera had that kind of courage. I was still learning mine. It was the third week of December, 4 days before Christmas, and I had decided that the feeling was mine to carry quietly, and I had been carrying it quietly for approximately 3 weeks, and I was doing an adequate job of it by all visible measures. And then he knocked on my studio door on a Thursday evening and said, "Can I show you something?" I saved my work and turned around. He was standing in the doorway with his laptop, which was unusual. He brought his camera everywhere, but his laptop was a working tool, not something he showed people things on as a rule. "Sure," I said. He came in and set the laptop on the desk and turned it to face me. It was a photography project. His photography project, the one I knew he had been building quietly for weeks, the one he had mentioned wanting to put together for a gallery submission in the new year. I had not seen any of it. He was private about work in progress, which I respected and never pushed. It was a series called Stayed. The photographs were of the apartment, our apartment, the kitchen table in the early morning with 2 coffee cups, the bookshelf with both our books mixed together without arrangement, the balcony in the afternoon light, the string lights along the kitchen window, a coat hook by the door with both our jackets side by side. And me, throughout the series in the corners and edges and occasionally the center, photographs of me that I had not known he was taking. Me working at my desk, me cooking, laughing at something, reading on the couch. Me at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, both hands around a mug, in photographs I had not realized existed from those evenings when I thought he was the one being seen. The series was about a place becoming a home, about the specific transformation that happens when 2 people make a space their own together, about staying, the quiet radical act of it after the kind of year that makes leaving feel like the only possible answer. It was, without a single word, the most clearly articulated expression of what the last 3 months had meant that I could have imagined. I looked at the photographs for a long time, then I looked at him. He was watching me with the expression he got when he had done something that had cost him something and was waiting to find out whether it had been worth it. "Mateo," I said. "I should have asked before including you," he said quickly. "I know, if you're not comfortable with it, I'll remove." "That's not what I was going to say." He stopped. "These are extraordinary," I said, and then, because the photographs had established a kind of honesty that felt impossible to step back from, "You photographed me like you see me." "I do see you," he said, simply, like it was obvious. "Like someone worth looking at," I said. "Callum," he said my name with a quality that made me go still. "I need to tell you something, and I need to say it badly and directly because I have been trying to find the elegant version for 3 weeks and it doesn't exist." I waited. "I know the timing is not ideal," he said. "I know I moved in here 2 months ago with 2 bags and a situation, and you were kind to me in a way that I was not expecting, and I am aware that there is a version of this that looks like I am confusing gratitude for something else." He held my gaze steadily. "I have thought about that version very carefully. I do not think it is what is happening. I think what is happening is that I have spent 2 months paying attention to who you actually are, and the conclusion I have arrived at is that I would very much like to keep paying attention to you, in the way that is different from how roommates pay attention to each other, for as long as you are willing to let me." The room was quiet in the specific way rooms get when something important has just been said in them. "You rehearsed that," I said. "Extensively," he said. "Is it all right that I said it?" "Mateo," I said, "I have been in love with you since approximately the 2nd week of November and have been carrying it quietly because I thought you needed time and I did not want to complicate your situation, and I had completely decided that I was going to keep carrying it quietly indefinitely." His expression did something rapid and complicated. "Since November," he said. "The photographs helped," I said, "and the stew, honestly the stew was very early." He made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost something else. "The stew," he repeated. "You left it on the counter with a post-it note, and I thought, this is a person who cares about whether people have eaten. What am I supposed to do with that?" He crossed the studio in 3 steps and stood in front of me, and I stood up from the chair, and we were the same height and very close. And he put his hands on either side of my face with the gentle deliberateness of someone who has imagined this and is now being careful with the reality of it. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I said. He kissed me, not rushed, not uncertain. The kiss of someone who had thought about this and was now doing it with full and quiet conviction. I put my hands on his waist and kissed him back with everything I had been carrying since November, and the studio around us was warm and the string lights were visible through the open door, and outside the Austin evening was doing its December thing, cool and clear and beginning to feel like something new. I need to tell you about the conversation we had the following morning, because it is as important as the kiss and maybe more so. We were at the kitchen table, 2 coffee cups, the early morning light, the photograph he had taken of this exact scene now somewhere in his series, both of us existing in it with the particular self-consciousness of people who know they are being more honest than they have been before. "I want to say something," he said. "Say it." "What you did these past 2 months, the tea at 2 in the morning and the music and just being present without requiring anything." He looked at his coffee cup. "I need you to know what that meant. I came into this apartment holding together by a fairly thin margin, and you never made me feel like that was a burden. You just made space." He looked up. "I want to do that for you too. I want to know what you need made space for." I thought about it. The question was specific and genuine and deserved a real answer. "I think," I said slowly, "that I have spent a long time making my life very small and very manageable because the bigger version felt risky. I organized everything to be fine, and fine is not the same as full." I looked at him across the table. "I think I need someone to notice when I'm doing that and say something." "I can do that," he said. "And I'll ask first," I said. "Before I fix things, I'll ask." He smiled, the full slow version, "Thank you." We sat with our coffees and the morning light, and I felt the specific and unfamiliar sensation of a life that was no longer arranged to be safe, but was opening toward something larger. And I was afraid of it in the way you are afraid of anything that matters, and also more awake than I had been in 2 years. In January, Matteo told his brother, "I want to tell you this because it mattered enormously and it cost him something, and the courage it required was real." Marco was 23 and studying in Houston, and had always been close to his brother in the specific way of siblings who have different personalities and the same deep values. Matteo had been holding this piece of himself back from Marco, not from shame exactly, but from the accumulated habit of managing how much of himself he revealed in any given direction. He called Marco on a Sunday afternoon while I was in the studio working, and I could hear, faintly, the low sound of his voice through the door. And when he came into the studio an hour later, his eyes were slightly red and his expression was the specific one of someone who has just done something difficult and found out it was worth it. He said, Matteo told me, sitting on the edge of my desk, that he already knew. He said he had known for years and was waiting for me to tell him and was starting to wonder if he needed to bring it up himself. He paused. He also said, and I am quoting directly, "I'd like to meet the person my brother is with when you're ready. Tell him I said the stew better be good." "You told him about the stew?" "I tell everyone about the stew. The stew is objectively important." I laughed. He laughed. He leaned over and pressed his forehead briefly against mine, a gesture that had become his specific vocabulary for "I am grateful and I am here and this is real," and I put my hand against the back of his neck and felt him exhale. "Good call," I said. "Yeah," he said, "good call." In February, the gallery accepted stayed. The opening was on a Friday evening, a small independent gallery on South Congress, warm and full of people who moved through the photographs with the quiet attention that good work earns. Matteo stood to one side in the way that artists do at their own openings, slightly removed, watching people encounter his work and allowing himself to feel the specific exposed vulnerability of having made something honest and let other people see it. I stood beside him. People stopped in front of the photographs of the apartment, the kitchen table, the coat hooks, the string lights. A woman spent a long time in front of the one of me reading on the couch, the lamp light and the particular quality of someone completely at ease in their own space, and then turned to her companion and said something in a low voice, smiling. She said, "It looks like what safety feels like," Matteo told me quietly. He had lip-read it. I looked at the photograph. Thought about the October he had arrived with 2 bags and rain in his hair and the carefully maintained composure of someone running out of options. Thought about the 2 in the morning kitchen and the stew on the counter and the string lights and the slow rebuilding of 2 people in the same space. Your mother's going to love this series, I said. She cried when I sent her the previews, he said, which for my mother means she thought it was extraordinary. It is extraordinary. He looked at me sideways. So are you, he said simply without performance. The way he said most of the things that cost him something, quiet and direct and completely real. I took his hand. We stood like that in the warm gallery light, surrounded by the evidence of what ordinary life looks like when someone pays close enough attention to it. And I thought about my sister telling me I needed a real person in a real room, and about Mateo showing up in the rain with 2 bags and a situation, and about everything that had grown in the months between that knock on the door and this moment. I had posted a room listing because my sister told me my life was too small. She had been right. It was not small anymore. It was full and warm and specific, the way lives are when someone enters them who sees you clearly and chooses to stay, and you are brave enough, finally, to let them.